the Sleepy Story Corner. Tonight, under a sky filled with stars and a full moon glowing over the calm sea, we journey to a quiet island cove where lanterns flicker softly beside the shore. The waves move gently, the palms whisper in the night breeze, and two lovers meet again beneath the moonlight after a long time apart. This is a peaceful story of waiting, returning, and a promise carried by the ocean itself. So get comfortable, relax your mind, and let the sound of the sea guide you into the story. And before we begin, please subscribe to the Sleepy Story Corner for more calming bedtime stories, peaceful journeys, and gentle tales to help you rest. On the quiet edge of Blue Water Cove, where the island leaned toward the sea as though listening to an old secret, the night opened like a deep blue silk cloth. Stars gathered in thousands above the palm-covered hills, and the moon, full and golden white, floated over the water with a calm so complete that even the waves seemed to hush themselves before touching the shore. Along the beach, small lanterns glowed like fireflies trapped inside glass. Their warm orange light trembled over the wooden deck, over two empty chairs, over a little round table set with candles, and over the soft folds of a blanket waiting for someone's shoulders. Beyond the deck, the sea stretched wide and shining, carrying a path of moonlight from the horizon all the way to the sand. It was here, beneath the palms and the moon, that Leora arrived first. She came barefoot down the narrow path from the hillside cottages, holding the hem of her pale blue dress just high enough to keep it from brushing the damp sand. Her dark hair was pinned loosely, but the ocean breeze had already stolen a few strands and laid them across her cheek. She did not move quickly. The cove had always asked for gentle steps, yet inside her heart, something was moving like a tide before a storm. For 7 years, Leora had known this shore. She had known the way the moon rose between the two black cliffs at the mouth of the bay. She had known which lanterns hissed when the wind turned east, which palms bent lowest during rain, and which tide pools held tiny silver fish at dawn. But on this night, everything looked changed, as though the entire cove had dressed itself for a secret ceremony. The candles on the table had not been there in the afternoon. The two wooden chairs had been pulled close, facing the moon, and beside one chair, placed carefully on the deck, was a small carved box made of sea-worn cedar. Leora stopped when she saw it. The waves continued their slow breathing. The box was no bigger than her hand. On its lid, someone had carved the shape of a crescent moon resting inside a wave. She knew that symbol. She had drawn it once, years before, on the corner of a letter she never sent. Her fingers hovered above the box, but she did not open it. Not yet. Instead, she looked toward the water. Far out beyond the moonlit path, a small boat was moving quietly across the silver sea. Its sail was down, Its lantern swung at the bow, a small golden dot drifting closer, rising and falling with the lazy water. There was only one person in it, Aaron. For a moment, Leora forgot to breathe. Aaron had been gone for 3 months, sailing between islands to repair the old lighthouse lenses that guided ships through the coral channels. He had promised to return before the moon turned full, but storms had come early that season. Messengers were delayed. Boats arrived with torn sails and frightened crews. There had been no word from him for 16 days. 16 days of Leora walking to the shore at sunrise. 16 days of watching the horizon with a calm face and restless hands. 16 nights of pretending to sleep while the sea whispered every fear she did not speak aloud. And now, beneath the greatest moon she had ever seen, he was returning in silence, as if the ocean itself had carried him home without wanting to wake the world. The little boat touched the shallows with a sigh. Aaron stepped out into knee-deep water and pulled it gently onto the sand. He was tall, with sun-browned skin, wind-tangled hair, and the tired grace of someone who had spent too many nights listening to ropes creak and waves knock against wood. His white shirt clung damply at the sleeves. A small scratch crossed one cheek, already healing. But when he looked up and saw Leora standing on the deck, every sign of weariness softened. He did not call out, neither did she. The cove held them in a silence richer than words. Aaron crossed the beach slowly. With every step, wet sand darkened beneath his feet. The lanterns painted warm gold along his face. Leora stayed where she was, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, the other near the unopened cedar box. At the edge of the deck, Aaron stopped. For the first time in months, they stood close enough to hear the quietest things. The shift of breath, the brush of palm leaves, the small crackle of candle flame. Leora, he said. His voice was low, roughened by travel, and filled with the softness of return. She answered only with his name, Aaron. The moon looked down on them. The sea shone brighter. Aaron stepped onto the deck, and Leora, unable to remain still any longer, moved toward him. They met between the lanterns, and he took her hands as though they were something precious he had carried in memory through every storm. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Leora looked at the scratch on his cheek, at the tiredness around his eyes, at the salt dried on his collar. "You are late," she said gently. A faint smile touched his mouth. The sea insisted on telling me a long story. And did it end well? He looked past her, toward the 2 chairs and the waiting candles. It brought me here. Leora lowered her gaze. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters tonight. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled before they could obey. Aaron saw it. His expression changed, all humor leaving him like a wave pulling back from sand. "I am sorry," he said, "for the silence, for making you wait. The waiting was not the hardest part." "What was?" She looked toward the water where his boat rested crookedly on the silver beach, not knowing whether the waiting had a shore. Aaron held her hands more firmly. "It has one. It always will." The wind moved through the palms. A lantern flame bent and straightened. Leora turned toward the cedar box beside the chair. "Did you leave that?" "I asked Mara to place it here before sunset. Mara told me nothing. She promised she would not." The old innkeeper of Blue Water Cove had never been able to keep a secret for more than an hour, unless the secret belonged to love. Then she guarded it like buried treasure. Leora looked again at the little box. "What is inside?" Aaron did not answer immediately. Instead, he led her to the chairs. They sat facing the sea, the small table between them glowing with candles. He took the cedar box and placed it in her hands. "Open it when the next wave reaches the silver stone," he said. Leora looked to where he pointed. Near the waterline, half buried in sand, lay a smooth, pale stone shining in the moonlight. "That is very specific," she said. "It matters." So they waited. The ocean gathered itself. A wave rolled forward, blue at its crest and white at its edge. It spread thin over the sand, touching shells, smoothing footprints, reaching, until at last it kissed the silver stone. "Now," Aaron whispered. Leora opened the box. Inside lay a folded piece of old parchment, a tiny shell no larger than a fingernail, and a ring made not of gold, but of moonstone set into a band of polished silver. The gem held the light in a strange way. It did not sparkle sharply. It glowed softly, like the moon seen through mist. Leora stared at it. Aaron watched her face, silent. She lifted the parchment first. It was worn at the corners, and when she unfolded it, she saw familiar handwriting, her own. At the top was a crescent moon resting inside a wave. A letter, the letter she had never sent. Years earlier, before love had been spoken between them, before either of them understood that every meeting on the shore had become a kind of promise, Leora had written a letter to Aaron. She had written it in a season of rain, when the sea was gray and she believed he would soon leave the island forever. She had written everything she was too afraid to say aloud, but she had never given it to him. She had folded it, sealed it, and hidden it inside a hollow beneath the old pier. Then one stormy night, the pier broke. The waves took the letter. She had thought it lost. Her fingers tightened around the parchment. "Where did you find this?" Aaron's voice softened. "On the smallest island north of the channel. It was caught inside a fisherman's net, sealed in wax, wrapped in seaweed and luck. The fisherman gave it to the lighthouse keeper. The lighthouse keeper saw the symbol and knew it belonged to someone from Blue Water Cove." Leora could not look away from the page. "You read it?" "No," he said. "Not until I knew whether you wanted me to." The answer startled her. She looked at him then, and the moonlight revealed what daylight often hid: the quiet patience in him, the tenderness that did not demand, the love that waited without taking. "I wrote this when I was afraid. she said. I know. How? Because you hid it instead of sending it. A small laugh escaped her, trembling and bright. Then her eyes filled. Erin reached across the table and touched her hand. There is another letter beneath it. Leora looked back into the box. Beneath the moonstone ring was a second folded paper. This one was new, clean, and tied with a thin blue thread. She opened it slowly. Erin had written only a few lines. The sea returned your words to me without letting me read them, so I am returning mine to you without asking for anything except this. Stay beside me through quiet waters and storm waters, through moonlit nights and mornings that come too soon. Let Blue Water Cove be our beginning again and again. Leora read the words twice, then a third time. The candles flickered, the sea breathed, the moon poured its light over the shore as though blessing every grain of sand. Erin rose from his chair and knelt beside her, not dramatically, not like a man performing for the stars, but like someone lowering himself closer to the truth. Leora, he said, will you marry me beneath this moon, beside this sea, in whatever life brings after this night? For a while, the only answer was the water. A small wave touched the shore and pulled away. Then another came. Leora held the ring in her palm. Her heart, which had spent 16 days moving between fear and hope, became suddenly still. She looked at Erin, the boy who had once carried broken lanterns for Mara, the young man who had learned the language of tides, the quiet lover who remembered the symbols she drew on forgotten letters. And in the hush of Blue Water Cove, she nodded. Yes, she said. Erin bowed his head for a moment, as if the word had passed through him like light. Then he took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. The moonstone glowed. Somewhere up the hill, hidden among the palms, a bell rang once, then again, not loudly, just enough to tell the sleeping cottages that something gentle and beautiful had happened by the sea. Leora laughed through tears. Mara, Erin smiled. She promised only to ring the bell after you answered. And if I had said no? She said she would ring it anyway and claim it was for midnight tea. They laughed softly, and the sound drifted across the beach, mixing with the hush of the tide. The night settled around them, not ending, not hurrying, but deepening. Erin wrapped the waiting blanket around Leora's shoulders, and they sat together in the wooden chairs, close enough that their hands rested between them, fingers intertwined. The moon remained high above the bay. Its reflection stretched across the water like a road no feet could walk, only eyes and dreams. For a long time, they spoke of small things. That is how hearts return to calm after fear. Erin told her about the island north of the channel, where goats slept on the steps of the lighthouse, and the keeper sang old sailor songs to the fog. He told her about the storm that had torn one sail and bent the mast, about a night when he could see nothing but rain and white foam, about how he kept thinking of the lanterns of Blue Water Cove, and the way Leora always stood, with one hand shading her eyes when she searched the horizon. Leora listened without interrupting, except once when she reached up and touched the scratch on his cheek. That came from the storm, a falling hook. You should have been more careful. I was very careful. The hook was careless. She shook her head, but she smiled. Then she told him about the cove during his absence, how the mango tree behind Mara's kitchen had dropped so much fruit that the children gathered it in baskets, how the youngest fisherman, Tomas, had sworn he saw a dolphin with a white mark shaped like a crown, how the old pier had finally been repaired, though one plank still complained under every footstep, how each evening, when the lamps along the beach were lit, she had paused at the waterline and listened. Aaron knew what she had listened for: his boat, his voice, the return that had now come. The tide moved closer, inch by inch. The candles burned lower. The lanterns made honey-colored patterns on the deck. After a while, Aaron stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me." Leora rose, keeping the blanket around her shoulders. Together they stepped from the deck onto the sand. It was cool beneath their feet, soft where the moon had touched it, damp where the sea had passed. They walked near the waterline, leaving two sets of footprints side by side. The cove seemed endless at night, though by daylight it was small. Under the moon, every palm became a dark tower, every rock a sleeping animal, every shell a pale secret waiting to be found. Far across the bay, little cottage lights glimmered along the hillside. Smoke rose from one chimney and vanished into the blue. The lovers walked without haste. Now and then, a wave rushed forward and curled around their ankles, then slipped away with a whispering sound. Leora held her dress with one hand and Aaron's hand with the other. The ring felt cool and new on her finger. Sometimes she looked down at it, not to admire it, but to make sure the night had not become a dream. At the far end of the beach stood the old moon arch. It was made by nature, not by human hands. Two black stones, leaning together at the base of the cliff, forming an opening through which the sea could be seen. During low tide, islanders walked beneath it for luck. During high tide, waves passed through it and sang in the hollow. Tonight, the tide was low enough. Aaron and Leora approached the arch. Moonlight silvered the stone. Tiny crabs scattered into cracks. A pool beneath the arch held the reflection of the star so clearly that it seemed as if the sky had spilled a little of itself onto the earth. Leora stopped before stepping through. "When I was small," she said, "my mother told me that anyone who walks beneath the moon arch while making a promise must keep it, because the sea remembers." "The sea remembers everything," Aaron said, "even lost letters. Especially those." They stood facing each other beneath the stone arch. The water murmured beyond them. Leora's blanket slipped slightly from one shoulder, and Aaron gently pulled it back into place. "What promise shall be made?" she asked. Aaron thought for a moment. "Nothing grand." "No? Grand promises are easy to say under a full moon." "And difficult at breakfast?" Very difficult before coffee. Leora laughed quietly. Then a small promise. A small one, Aaron said, but kept every day. So beneath the moon arch, with the sea listening, they promised to return to gentleness whenever the world became loud. They promised to speak before silence grew heavy. They promised to remember that love was not only in storms survived, but in cups of tea, mended nets, shared blankets, and the simple courage of staying. No thunder answered them. No great wind rose. Only a wave slid forward, touched their feet, and withdrew. The sea had heard. They walked back slowly. By then the night had grown softer. The stars seemed lower, as if leaning closer to the island. The moon was still bright, but it had begun its slow descent toward the western ridge. Somewhere in the palms, night birds called to one another in sleepy notes. The cottages along the hill had gone dark one by one, until only Mara's kitchen window remained lit. On the deck, the candles had nearly melted into pools of gold. Aaron trimmed one wick with the tip of a small knife. Leora sat again and opened the cedar box once more. Her old letter rested inside, still unread by him. She held it for a moment. Then she passed it across the table. "You may read it now," she said. Aaron accepted it carefully. "Are you certain?" "Yes, but quietly." He unfolded the worn parchment. The words were old, but the feeling in them had not aged. He read of a rainy season and a girl who watched the young man repair lanterns along the pier. He read of her fear that he would sail away and belong forever to other horizons. He read how she loved the calm way he listened, the way he spoke to stray cats as though they were harbor officials, the way he knew the names of winds. He read how she had wanted to tell him, but had chosen instead to hide the letter, because losing unspoken love seemed safer than risking a spoken one. Aaron's face changed as he read. Not greatly, only enough for Leora to see the tenderness settle deeper. When he finished, he folded the page along its old creases. "I wish I had found it then," he said. Leora shook her head. "No. No? If you had found it then, perhaps everything would have happened differently, faster, more foolishly. We were young. We are still foolish." "Yes," she said, "but now we are better at it." Aaron placed the letter back in the box, beside his own. Then the sea delivered it at the right time. It usually does. Above them, a palm frond stirred. The lanterns clicked softly as their metal warmed and cooled. The ocean kept its slow rhythm, folding and unfolding itself along the shore. The lovers leaned back in their chairs. Sleepiness began to drift over the cove like mist. Not the heavy sleep of exhaustion, but the gentle kind that comes after fear has passed and joy has settled into the body. Leora's eyes grew half-lidded. Aaron noticed and drew the blanket more fully around her. She did not protest. Her head tilted toward his shoulder. "Do not let me fall asleep here," she murmured. "I would never." "You sound untrustworthy." "I am entirely trustworthy until the next wave." The next wave came and went. Leora did not move. Aaron looked down at her with a smile so quiet it barely touched his face. Then he reached for another blanket from behind the chair and covered them both. The candles were almost gone now, but the moon was bright enough. The whole deck shone in blue and silver. For a while, Aaron remained awake. He watched the sea that had delayed him, frightened her, carried her letter, and returned him home. He watched the moon path ripple and break, then join itself again. He watched the small boat resting on the sand, its rope tied to a driftwood post. He listened to Leora's breathing become slow and even. The storm seemed far away now. All storms did, from this chair, in this cove, with her beside him. But the night had one more secret to reveal. Just as the moon lowered near the western palms, a pale light appeared beneath the surface of the water. At first, Aaron thought it was only reflection. But then the light moved, spreading in soft blue-green sparks along the edge of a wave. Another wave rolled in, and it glowed too. Then another. Soon the shallows shimmered with tiny living stars, each one waking beneath the touch of motion. Bioluminescence. The sea itself was glowing. Aaron gently touched Leora's shoulder. "Wake for a moment." She stirred, reluctant. "Is it morning?" "No, better." She opened her eyes. At first, she looked at him, confused by sleep. Then she followed his gaze to the water. The next wave broke in a blue-green shimmer, bright as scattered jewels. It washed up the sand, glowing around shells and stones, then faded as it sank away. Leora sat up slowly. "Oh!" Another wave came, brighter than the last. The cove was full of quiet light. They left the blankets behind and walked to the shore. With each step in the wet sand, tiny sparks appeared around their feet. Leora laughed softly, not wanting to disturb the night. Aaron stepped into the shallows, and the water lit around his ankles like liquid stars. Leora joined him. Together they stood in the glowing sea beneath the fading moon. The waves were calm, no higher than a whisper. Each one arrived carrying blue fire, curled around them, and disappeared into darkness. It was as if the sky had fallen into the ocean, and the ocean, pleased by the gift, had decided to shine back. Leora lifted her hand. The moonstone ring caught both moonlight and sea glow, holding them together in one soft gleam. "Now," she said, "I know this is a dream." Aaron looked at the water shining around them. "Then it is a dream with cold ankles." She smiled and leaned against him. They remained there until the glow began to fade, until the moon slipped lower, until the first hint of dawn touched the far side of the sky with the faintest gray. Then they returned to the deck. Aaron gathered the cedar box, the letters, the blankets, and the lantern nearest the table. Leora took the candle that was still burning and shielded it with her hand. Together they climbed the path toward the cottages, leaving the beach behind them. But the beach did not feel empty. It held their footprints. It held the chairs facing the sea. It held the memory of a question asked and answered. It held the promise beneath the moon arch. And as the tide rose, careful and patient, it began to smooth the sand. not erasing what had happened, but keeping it in the way the sea keeps all things, hidden, shining, and deep. By sunrise, Blue Water Cove would look ordinary again. Fishermen would push their boats into the morning water. Mara would open her kitchen windows and pretend not to know why her eyes looked so pleased. Children would run down the path looking for shells. The repaired pier would creak under familiar footsteps. The moon would be gone from the sky, and the lanterns would sleep unlit beside the deck. But beneath the ordinary morning, the night would remain. It would remain in the cedar box on Leora's shelf. It would remain in the moonstone ring. It would remain in Aaron's careful hands when he poured tea before she asked. It would remain in the way Leora paused at the shore, no longer searching the horizon with fear, but greeting it as an old friend. And many years later, when travelers came to Blue Water Cove and asked why two wooden chairs always sat facing the moonlit sea, Mara would smile her secretive smile and say only that some stories belonged to the water. But on calm nights, when the moon was full and the waves were slow, the islanders sometimes heard laughter near the shore, soft as candlelight. They saw two figures walking by the waterline, hand in hand, leaving footprints that glimmered faintly whenever the tide touched them. And those who knew the old ways would lower their voices and say that the sea remembered. The sea remembered the waiting. The sea remembered the return. The sea remembered the letters, the ring, the promise, and the two lovers beneath the moon. Night after night, Blue Water Cove continued its gentle breathing. The palms swayed, the lanterns glowed, the stars gathered above the hills, and the waves, calm and endless, came home to the shore again and again.